Multilante by Starlight Fandom Eclipse. Read by My Lost and Found. This is part 2 of 3. As always, link to the fic is in the description below, and continuing on with the story. Kigo would like it to be on the record that he was minding his own business for once, eating a bagel in the break room in the commission's headquarters when it happened. Growing up, he was trained to be ready for anything. The HPSC wouldn't settle for anything less than perfect, so neither did he. Assassinations, natural disasters, muggings, he was taught to manage it all, sometimes at the same time. How to interact with civilians, villains, and other heroes to get information or simply improve his image. It would not be arrogant of Kigo to say he was trained to handle everything and anything. Which is why he definitely didn't freeze when someone in an aqua-colored dinosaur hoodie entered the break room. Rephrase that. They casually strolled into the break room that only Hawks and other agents with clearance could even access, wearing something that was so against dress code it dealt psychic damage to even think of it in a workplace setting, let alone a government office. Kigo would never admit that it was 20 seconds before he even realized he should be apprehending them. That was a secret between him and the dinosaur, who had by then sat down at the chair across from him and laid their head on the table, which brought him to where he was now, watching the Vigilante wait alone in the interrogation room from behind a one-way glass panel. The person brought in for the interrogation was a freelance agent, one with a quirk that could compel someone to tell the truth in response to questions. In theory, it was the perfect quirk for this situation, and the interrogation should have been over by now. In practice, it turns out verbal response quirks don't work when the target is mute. The restraints on their hands kept them from signing more than what they could fingerspell, but that was more than enough to establish that there was a problem. To make things worse, they couldn't actually remove the costume. For some ungodly reason, they were wearing a black morph suit under the hoodie, which was irritating enough without the realization that it was made of the most durable, quirk-resistant material that he had ever seen. 15 different quirks, including his own, were tried. All failed. What bothered him the most was that their zippers were inversed. Kigo could understand how that would work for the hoodie, which they were still working on removing. For some reason, the zippers stopped working at the neck. The material was too stiff to pull over their head, indicating that some greater force out there hated them. But the skin-tight morph suit? How had the Vigilante even put that on? Midoriya Inko's quirk was quite special, in the sense that it didn't actually interact with the materials she used it on. It only attracted objects, not manipulated them, which is why her quirk wasn't labeled as telekinesis. This made her useful in hero costume manufacturing, as she could use her quirk around quirked items. It also made her invaluable for maintaining Izuku's wardrobe as he got older. When he was a toddler, she used to sew his zippers inside out so he wouldn't be able to randomly ditch his onesie. She'd gotten into the habit that she didn't realize she still designed his clothing that way, or that Izuku had learned how to unzip them from the inside, the same way a kid learns how to defeat a child-proof lock. At this point, one might wonder why they didn't continue the interrogation with sign language, or something written, which they would have done, if not for the fact they didn't have anyone on hand with a quirk that could ensure truth in those methods. So Kigo was left to guard a room with someone wearing the most stupid-looking dinosaur hoodie that was somehow back to being zipped fully up. Just looking at those soulless, screen-printed eyes was enough to make him wish he was anywhere else. The hoodie wasn't too bad, if he was speaking honestly. It would have been funny if it didn't interrupt the one break he had that day. But Kigo was spiteful when he wanted to be, so he continued his staring contest with something that couldn't blink or even see him. This is what his life had come to. If Hawks had taken the hooded vigilante group more seriously, he might have thought more about the fabric spikes that trailed from the head down to the spike of the hoodie. Each hood came with a unique element to their fighting styles that the others didn't. Some were obvious. Hiro had her feather tranquilizer darks. Shiro wore brass knuckles. Kuro had metal claws. Murasaki kept to his raccoon theme by weaponizing trash. Others were more surprising, like Midori's knives or Heiro's taser. Akka had the tendency to throw heavy things and let physics do the rest, though her insults sometimes did just as much damage. Really, Hawk's first sign of trouble should have been how different the dinosaur's hoodie was from all the others, but even that wouldn't have prepared him for Mizuedo. The funny thing about nitrous oxide is that at room temperature, it is a colorless gas with only a slight metallic scent defining its presence. It is, of course, one of the safest and most effective medicines in terms of fulfilling its designated purpose, which is for anesthetic and pain-reducing efforts. Of course, another funny thing about nitrous oxide is that it's more commonly known as laughing gas. Hawks was out cold before he realized the spikes concealed a number of air diffusers. By the time he regained consciousness, the only signs the vigilante was ever there was all the misplaced coffee machines from all the break rooms, a missing wheel from every spinning chair on the third floor, a broken, and subsequently ransacked, vending machine, and a Sharpie mustache drawn on Hawks's face. Ochako laughed as Izuku recounted the events of his week as they snacked on stolen vending machine food on her apartment's fire escape. Sitting beside her ex-classmate turned vigilante, Ochako could admit that she didn't see this coming when the man tried to mug her earlier that week. Emphasis on tried. The whole routine kind of falls apart when the person you're mugging has an empty wallet. That's right. She was so broke, the guy mugging her actually hesitated before frustration kicked in and he raised his knife. Ochako wanted nothing more than to move, to use what she learned in class for self-defense. But the villain had used his quirk on some nearby chain-link fence to trap her before she even had the chance to fight. Some hero student she was turning out to be. When she was saved during the entrance exams, she had looked at the plain boy's face and thought, "That's who I want to be." To save someone at the cost of yourself, for no other reason than it was the right thing to do. He didn't even hesitate when he grabbed some rebar and used it to pry the concrete off her, carrying her to safety before running back into the fray to help anyone else who might have been stuck in the line of fire. Watching him direct the other examinees to make sure everyone was all right when the exam ended, she couldn't help but want to know more about this boy, who was already the hero she dreamed of becoming one day. Ochako would not forgive Aizawa-sensei for expelling him on orientation day, before classes even started and anyone had the chance to learn. So what if he was quirkless? Was she the only one who saw him fighting robots with random debris, saw him lifting things she wouldn't have been able to manage without her quirk? He moved so fast, even when carrying her that day. When she heard the boy was quirkless, her first thought had been to wonder how to ask him later for his training routine. Aizawa-sensei's reaction was to get rid of him before she could even learn his name. Even after watching the man defend them at the USJ, after learning that he was a strict but accommodating teacher to everyone in class, Ochako could not bring herself to like him. She had asked every upperclassman she could about Aizawa-sensei, asking about his expelled students that he supposedly re-enrolled shortly after they addressed whatever issue he had kicked them out for. The cocky learned to accept criticism, the careless paid more attention, the lazy worked harder. The boy who saved her was expelled for being quirkless, despite what the UA website said about accepting quirkless students into the hero course. It never said anything about keeping them there. One couldn't learn their way out of being quirkless, and the boy was no longer a student at UA. It was unfair. If it was a hero's job to face the odds and beat them, to correct that unfairness, the boy had already done that. He had proved himself to the already rigged system, and it still rejected him. Did she even want to be a part of something that actively worked against someone as kind and strong as him? So here she was, pinned and waiting for a killing blow for the second time that year, not even sure if she wanted to be a hero anymore. Moral issues aside, how could she ever hope to be a hero when she kept getting stuck in these situations where she couldn't do anything? Stuck at the mercy of someone uncaring of everything you work towards. Was this how the boy felt? Standing against Aizawa-sensei with the class watching silently as he was expelled? Why didn't she say something? Anything? It was so easy to speak up for him after the entrance exams, to offer up all her points if that's what it took to repay his actions. So why couldn't she bring her body to move in his defense that day? Was it fear? Selfishness? Shock? It kept her up at night, wondering if there was something she could have done that day to help the boys she wanted to become friends with. Ochako closed her eyes and braced for pain as the man stabbed his blade. And for the second time that year, that boy saved her. Of course, she didn't know it was him at first. There was a thwacking sound, and she looked up to see the villain collapsing. Behind him, someone in a brown bear hoodie lowered a wooden baseball bat. "Apologies for the delay, miss. I didn't know whether this metal manipulation quirk let him sense metal, so I dropped most of my gear to make sure I didn't startle him when he was holding you. If you'll forgive me, I must backtrack to collect my wire cutters." She sighed in relief and smiled at the vigilante as he promised to return soon. She followed the news and recognized this one as Chairo. It was a surprise to see him on patrol. Like the sheep Shiro, he generally specialized in taking down organized crime. Both were brutal, just in different ways. Shiro would generally fight enemies head-on, while Chairo set up literal bear traps and used other methods to thin out the crowds and deal with nastier quirks. Though they were never seen together. According to an interview Kiro did, Hood spread out to take care of as much as possible and ensure no two members could be taken out at once. It was a ruthlessly efficient model, though nobody could deny its effectiveness. It was accepted that wherever Shiro was, Chairo wasn't far. Apparently, the threat of never knowing where the second was hidden was more fear-inducing than actually facing two opponents in a fight. That's what was said in the interviews of captured villains, anyway. Before long, Chairo was back. He talked her through what he was doing as he worked with his multi-tool. It would take a little longer since he was bending the cutting edge to make sure she wouldn't hurt if she fell. Ochako offered to make herself weightless to solve that problem if he freed one of her arms first, which he did. Before long, she found herself chatting casually with the vigilante, just a few meters away from the villain that tried to kill her. "I just wish there was some way to contact him, but he's not even in the student files. Trust me, I checked. The principal caught me and gave me the detention of the year for breaking into the teacher's office. He didn't even say anything to the other teachers, just a warning not to get caught again." "Not a warning to stay out of the office?" "That's what I thought too. So then I broke into the school's record room." Chairo snorted. What was his reaction to that? "I didn't say I got caught that time." "It's Nezu." "Touché. He actually was nicer that time. I think he was more amused that I thought of it, let alone actually finding the place. He told me that if I could learn the boy's name without getting found out again, or asking a teacher before the end of the semester, he'd mail him a letter I wrote and wouldn't punish me for the record room thing." "Any luck? I imagine finals are approaching soon." "No. I don't want to waste my last chance, so I've been looking everywhere a student is allowed to access. I swear that he's using this as an opportunity to improve security as I tried different ways." Chairo hummed, and the last of the fence was removed. Ochako gratefully took his hand as he pulled her out, canceling her quirk once she was upright. She regathered her things from around the alleyway as Chairo returned to the downed villain and double-checked the bindings. "Well, I do believe now would be a good time to call the police. I must be leaving now. I trust you have this handled?" She nodded, already taking out her phone. Thank you so much, Chiro, for saving me and staying to chat. You could have left me for the police, you know? Chiro shrugged. I could help you, so I did. Speaking of, there's an abandoned beach not too far from here, covered in trash. It's called Diogoba Beach, and it's very secluded in the evenings. If you have the chance, visit tonight. I think it'll be rewarding. Ochako didn't understand, but nodded. She got the distinct impression that he was winking behind that bear hood. Turning to face the downed villain, she dialed the emergency number and waited. Later that day, Ochako found herself gaping at what used to be a beach. How did trash dragged in from the tides form piles so high? Were there vehicles down there? Yeah, isn't it a mess? She knew that voice. Whipping around with wide eyes, she saw the boy standing there with a nervous smile. He was dressed in jogging pants, bright red sneakers, a hood tied around his waist, and a t-shirt reading pajamas. It was so dorky. She couldn't help the wide smile on her face. I'm Uraraka Ochako. What's your name? The boy blinked before smiling in return. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to meet you, Uraraka-san. Can I have your number? She blurted out, not willing to leave anything to chance now that she finally found him again. Ochako didn't think about how forward and strange this whole conversation must seem out of context, but thankfully Midoriya only laughed before taking out his own phone. Only if you split some food with me. I kinda acquired a lot of snacks, but I don't really like some of the flavors, and the people running the food donation center don't accept anything without a receipt ever since that villain group robbed a bunch of warehouses and donated it all. I get why that's bad, but why would the center need receipts? Oh, the companies that were robbed tried to sue the center by saying it was an inside job. They didn't succeed, but it was a close one, and they've been cautious with bulk donations ever since. That's awful. Well, I wouldn't mind sharing if you want to come by my apartment this weekend. I want to learn all about you. I really hope we can be good friends, even if we don't go to the same school. Of course. It's a deal. They talked for a bit after that, her quizzing Midoriya on what he was up to the past few months. He actually ended up blurting out his vigilante identity to try and calm her down when he admitted that no school would take in anyone UA completely expelled, let alone someone quirkless. It was a bit of a shock, though not enough to completely quench her righteous anger. It was his idea to work her emotions out by training her quirk on the trash below. They stayed up far too late, chucking weightless trash at each other and dodging through the stacks in the most intense game of not dodgeball she ever played. It was a good thing Midoriya looked at his phone at around 1 a.m. Otherwise, she might have slept through her alarm and missed the chance to burst victoriously into Nezu's office. She did feel a bit bad about startling the scarecrow-looking man so much he coughed up blood, not bad enough to stop her from declaring her new best friend's name with a shit-eating grin. Shoto was not having a good day. Well, that was a slight understatement. A bad day generally consisted of a few things going wrong. A missed train stop, lost pens, having to talk to his father, and the school cafeteria running out of cold soba before he even got there for lunch. Being kidnapped by the League of Villains was fairly more than an inconvenience, objectively speaking. But at least he wasn't alone. Unchain me so I can kill you, you fucking bastards! Maybe being alone would have been better. Looking around the bar, Shoto could observe the villains in various stages of regretting Bakugo's presence. The only person that looked to be happy was Shigaraki, whose wide grin at the screaming wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement of the blonde's behavior. Maybe the villain liked Bakugo because they were so similar? They both had red eyes, dangerous hands, bad attitude, anger issues. If Shigaraki's hair were lighter and his skin quality were better, he'd think they were related. Then again, those differences weren't enough to convince him otherwise. He was taken out of his thoughts by movement in the room. A member that Shoto hadn't seen before. Someone in a blue shark hoodie was starting to pass around drinks for celebration. Ah, thanks, Moonfish. A blonde girl with 2 hair buns gushed before she began chugging her red drink. Now, Shoto may make it to rule not to listen to his father, but that doesn't mean he never looks at the files in Endeavor's home office. Known by the epithet, the death row inmate, Moonfish was a deranged cannibal. Before he broke out of prison, the man was strapped in a straitjacket with metal clamps that were supposedly meant to block his quirk, Blade Tooth. Judging by his subsequent appearances attacking civilians and heroes on the news, whoever designed those restraints should be fired. He could see the confusion, considering sharks were fish and the large tooth smile on the hoodie, if one were to have only heard the villain's name. But whoever that was, it definitely wasn't Moonfish. The person stopped by the bar's television, the one not playing the news, to readjust their hold on their drinks before approaching Kodagiri. They offered him the last glass on the platter, everyone else already drinking theirs.
No thank you. I've no desire to be indisposed while on the job. It's only a little alcohol, nothing that will get anyone drunk.
Shoto couldn't place the otherworldly-sounding voice, though it was easier to hear after Bakugo suddenly tensed and stopped screaming.
Everyone else is having some. There's no reason our leader would be against you treating yourself after all the work you've done for us today.
The statement was met with cheers and agreement from the other members, Shigaraki himself pausing in his drink to nod. Kodagiri paused, waiting for any objections, before slumping into feet and taking the last glass.
Wait, what about you, Moonfish? Aw, I couldn't carry any more. I'm going to the back to get more for myself and the guests, if Shigaraki is okay with that.
The man nodded again, saying something about hospitality and welcoming new potential recruits. Shoto noted that he looked particularly pleased to be given the final say in the matter. Sure enough, after 20 minutes of rummaging in the back, not Moonfish came out with 3 red solo cups. After talking to Shigaraki about unchaining their arms,
they need their hands to drink, and they're outnumbered. Besides, these cups I found won't damage anything if they're thrown.
They walked towards the 2 hero students, setting down the tray. The hooded person approached Shoto first, leaning over him as they messed with his chains.
Wait for my signal,
they whispered.
I'm just giving you water, but pretend it's alcohol.
He didn't have many other options, so Shoto listened. He quietly accepted the cup, taking a small sip to confirm. It didn't rule out drugs, so he was careful not to have too much. He relaxed when Bakugo miraculously decided to play along, and didn't use his quirk the second his wrists were unbound, accepting the cup. Surprisingly, he seemed much more willing to drink from it, though in hindsight, Shoto wasn't sure what he was expecting from his hot-headed classmate. Then, as if his life hadn't already been weird enough, every villain in the room collapsed on the spot. Sharkhood immediately got to work on the rest of their chains.
I'll talk more later. We need to get out of here. I'm Al. I use he, they, she pronouns, and I'm part of the hoods. I drugged their drinks and temporarily blocked communications, but I don't know how long it'll last.
Shoto stood as soon as they, he'll stick with they to be safe, finished working on his chains. They led the way out the back door, passing them 2 black sweatshirts and instructing them to pull up their hoods in case they were followed. It wasn't hard to keep up with Ao, as they wound through the alleyways of what they explained was Yokohama's city's Camino ward. When they could hear the faint sound of traffic on the main road, Bakugo grabbed the Vigilante by their shoulder and slammed them into the nearest wall.
What the fuck were you thinking, Deku?
Before Shoto could react, to either stop Bakugo or help him, he wasn't sure. Ao tucked one of the arms in their hood, reaching up from within to unzip the face portion of it. Shoto blinked as a vaguely familiar face emerged.
In my defense, I didn't actively seek them out. I was just patrolling and they offered me a spot on the team. I think they were short on numbers. I heard them talking about recruiting Muscular before Kiddo took him down.
Bakugo actually growled.
Answer my fucking question before I blast your face to hell. Why the fuck are you a vigilante? Does Auntie know?
The boy. Were they a boy? Shoto wasn't sure where the vigilante persona met the real identity beneath. Chewed his lip.
If I agree to tell you everything, can we do this somewhere else? Heroes are still combing the street for you two. And if I say more, you'll have to work harder to get around any truth quirk when you go to the police for questioning on the kidnapping.
For a moment, Shoto was sure Bakugo was going to kill them right there. After a few tense seconds of silence, he huffed and pushed himself off the wall.
Fine, but the second we're out of custody, you've got a lot of explaining to do. Now get out of here before I change my mind.
The vigilante quickly zipped back up their hoodie and darted back deeper into the alley. Shoto turned to the other.
We? As if you would just let it drop. I don't want to hear any of your shitty theories, so the nerd might as well tell both of us after revealing himself like that. Now let's get this shit over with.
Following Bakugo towards the main street, Shoto reflected on everything that brought him to this point. At least the day was turning out better than he thought it would go an hour ago.